The revolution didn't mean expansion of freedom for all Americans. Loyalists were individuals who maintained their allegiance to the British Crown, King George III, seen here. 20 to 25% of colonists at the time were loyal to the Crown during the Revolution. 20,000 of them fought for the British during the war. New York, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and the Carolinas were strongholds for Loyalists. George Washington used to refer to New York as enemy territory. Loyalists had their property confiscated, their voting rights stripped, and were even expelled from the colonies. 100,000 leave the United States at the end of the war. Those who stayed were reintegrated into American society, which was something that was unique to the American Revolution, as there was no bloody terror to go after the anti-revolutionaries at the end of the war. Indians viewed the revolution as a loss of freedom. Colonists moved westward to claim Indian land east of the Mississippi. Some tribes backed the British, while others backed the Americans. This was a portrait done by Gilbert Stuart of Joseph Brant, who was a Mohawk military and political leader. He led Indians and Loyalists against the colonial rebels on the New York frontier. This is a painting done by Benjamin West of the Treaty of Paris. In it, you see the American delegation. The British delegation refused to sit for the painting, and therefore the painting was never finished. The Treaty of Paris ended the American Revolution and led the British to abandon their Indian allies. It also recognized American control of everything east of the Mississippi River. As Americans continued their westward movement, conflict with Native Americans would intensify and eventually bring about an end to the Indian way of life. New state governments would be elected by the people and therefore be accountable to them. And what the voters wanted was Indian land. In 1776, the year of the Declaration of Independence, when Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal, 1/5 of the nation's people were slaves. That's about 500,000 people. At the time, Jefferson owned more than 100 slaves himself. Other than liberty, the word slavery was the word most often used during the Revolution to depict the treatment of the colonists by the British. This revolutionary rhetoric guaranteed that the time would come when slavery would have to be debated publicly and what its role in the new nation would be. This is a painting called The Old Plantation. The artist is unknown. It was started in 1790 and finished in 1800. African Americans used the language of the Revolution to petition New England courts and legislatures during the 1770s. They asked American colonists who were fighting the oppression of the British to end oppression over slaves. 5,000 slaves fought for American independence. The war offered opportunities for freedom for many slaves through escape or fighting on the side of the British. 100,000 slaves escaped their plantations and fled to help the British. Many of them were recaptured at the end of the war and returned to their owners. This is a clipping from the Virginia Gazette from March of 1766. It's an ad describing what a runaway slave looks like and asking for him to be returned to his owner. Between 1777, when Vermont's Constitution prohibited slavery, and 1804, when New Jersey's banned it, every state north of Maryland was moving towards emancipation. This was not an immediate emancipation, though. Instead, it was a gradual emancipation. Gradual emancipation meant that living slaves would not be freed. Only the newborn children of slave women would be freed, and only after they served their owner till adulthood. Emancipation and escapes created free black communities for the first time in American history, where they elected their own leaders and established their own churches and schools. In all but 3 states, Maryland, South Carolina, and Georgia, free blacks who met property and tax requirements had the right to vote. By 1790, after the American Revolution, 700,000 slaves were now in the United States. That's 200,000 more slaves than when the nation declared its independence from Britain. Women contributed greatly to the struggle for independence. At least one woman, seen here, Deborah Sampson, disguised herself as a man to fight in the Continental Army. Other women made homespun goods, raised money for troops, acted as spies, and protested merchants' high prices during the war. This is Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams wrote to her husband John Adams as he was helping to establish the new government and nation, and pleaded with him to, quote, remember the ladies. Gender did remain an important boundary in America following the Revolution. Husbands still had legal authority over the body, property, and choices of their wives. Women lacked legal and political rights. Their duty and obligation was as wives and mothers. This is a portrait of George Washington and his family. George and Martha are seated. Their servant is standing in the background, and these are Martha Washington's two grandchildren who are in the painting. While women lacked political and legal rights, there was a role for them in society, and that role was viewed as something called Republican motherhood. Republican motherhood was the idea that it was women's responsibility to train their children to be virtuous future citizens. This brought about increased educational opportunities for women. It also led to an emerging ideal of a companionate marriage, cemented by affection and mutual dependency rather than male authority.